One, two, three.
He's a very clever man, that Alan Menken. He's like Mr. Melody. Whenever he would send in a song on Beauty and the Beast or Hunchback or some of the Aladdin songs, you can't get them out of your mind. There's no antidote for them except another Alan Menken song because they're so gettable and singable.
Alan, in my estimation, is one of the greatest melody writers of our time.
Alan Menken, I think, will be forever associated with a kind of an amazing renaissance in animation, particularly in the form of a musical. You have to realize the musical was completely dead on Broadway with a few exceptions. And I think Alan felt like one of the ways that musicals could live on was in this art form of animation, which at its time was kind of dead and being reborn. And so with his work on Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, Pocahontas, so many other movies, I think he brought back the idea of musicals to the movies.
Percussion, strings, winds, words.
I was born to my mother's Judy Menken and Dr. Norman Menken, DDS. They lived in Astoria, Queens. I was a 2 months premature and a breech birth. I made it really difficult coming out. Had the cord wrapped around my neck twice. They had to put me back in and bring me back out and turn me around. And when I came out, I looked sort of like a spider. I looked completely unfinished, and I cried all the time. In fact, I screamed all the time.
Alan, from the time he was born, the arms were going, and even when he was a little toddler, a little boy, we used to say, Alan is juggling. He'd get excited about something, and his hands would go like to be thinking about it.
Be our guest, put our service to the test.
When Alan was about 2, 3 years old, I could play something, and he vocally could hit that note, that final note, perfectly.
He'd be walking around with his diaper hanging between his knees, but he was dancing to that music and reach up and he'd find the right key on the piano.
We would sit around the piano, and he'd play Rodgers and Hart. Remember the Rodgers and Hart songbook and the Gershwin songbook and the Broadway tunes.
We have the biggest collection of 33 1/3 albums of musical shows going back to South Pacific.
He started out with piano, then he took violin. It was his violin teacher, Edith Braham, I remember, who encouraged him to compose.
The first time out, I think he got an honorable mention at the age of 9. He was a good kid, he was a great kid. As a child, as a little one, when he got to be an adolescent, he could be a little rebellious, but as a kid, he was great.
I remember being in my living room and conducting. But I thought conducting was pointing to the notes. So I'd stand there and go da 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 dum, da 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 da, and my arm was very tired. I found that I was able to mentally get into the inside of a song and figure out where a chord took me someplace special. This one chord change. I would just get so excited listening to Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony and imagining, in a sense, creating a scenario. What is this about? It's music, but it's more than music. Music transports you to someplace. Sometimes it's someplace very specific. Sometimes it's someplace in a dream. My mother's an actress and a writer. My father is still a dentist at 81. He's 82, I'm sorry. He's still... My dad's brother was a dentist, now is an orthodontist. My father's sister's husband is a dentist. My mother's sister's husband is a dentist. We're just lousy with dentists in this family. And I went to NYU as a pre-med, and I went to school in 1967, and the world was exploding around us. The first teacher I found, real teacher, was Lehman Engel. He laid out before us how you do a musical, how the songs function in a musical, really examine why a song works, why a song doesn't work, how you tell a story through song. And I then became part of a community of writers who did this for a living. I was performing in clubs, and I was writing jingles. And then I wrote a rock ballet right out of college. And then Downtown Ballet Company commissioned me to do this ballet, and I put together a band. And within 6 months, this beautiful ballet dancer joined the company named Janice Roswick. And I was in love.
And I said, now don't fall in love with the composer just because he's a composer, you know? And I met him, you know, I kind of ignored him, right?
Mm-hmm. And I said, hi.
Oh, yeah.
And she said, excuse me, I have to meditate. I said, oh. So she went and sat.
Days of
She was
TM.
doing TM.
I still do that
I
sometimes.
still want to do it, yeah. And then she opened her eyes, and I said, so hi. When she first met me, I was writing music and lyrics, and I was writing these songs, and a lot of these songs were songs like called Janice. Or Janice, you're my panacea.
That was good.
Every time I see you. Or about our life together. You know, we were young. Music was where I wanted to feel free. Music was where I wanted to, fly. Two big fantasies are, I suppose, hitting home runs and being in the center of a rock concert. My very first musical was God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater with Howard Ashman. He met with various people and chose me. And so we had to break through whatever differences we had to become brothers, and we did, became complete brothers.
Alan and Howard were a team in every sense of the word. They were a strong collaborative team, and they had this huge hit, Little Shop of Horrors, on Broadway.
I was the fuel, maybe, and he was the rocket. Whatever it was, I attached myself to his sense of dramatic purpose and honed my music to telling that story. And as we went along, I would give very valuable opinions, I think, and extremely important contributions musically, but Howard was the one with the artistic compass. Disney came to Howard with a number of possible projects. One was The Little Mermaid, an animated musical. First thing that Howard Ashman and I did when we worked on Little Mermaid was just to play with a rhythm, you know, that chicka-da-bop-dop, chicka-ticka-da-bop-bop-a-ticka-da-bop-bop-a-doop-bop, chicka-ticka-ticka-da-bop-bop, and only then came. Wanted a rhythm that just went around in a circle and fed back into itself.
The seaweed is always greener in somebody else's lake. You dream about going up there, but that is a big mistake.
All the classic Disney animation was coming out now on video. There was this new format, the VHS tape, and my daughters were just born. So here we were now, we were buying these VHS tapes and looking at Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Peter Pan, Pinocchio. The assignment was to create an animated feature that could sit on the shelf alongside these others. It was sort of a stunning opportunity, and it opened up a whole new chapter of my life.
Alan actually composed on the piano an underscore for the movie while we were animating it. It was almost like a silent movie version, so as we had our temporary version of the movie up, where we had our held drawings, it hadn't been animated yet, there would be this kind of silent movie piano score that formed the basis of the underscore that Alan composed.
Look at this trove, treasures untold. How many wonders can one cavern hold?
We were actually adapting Disney animation. Our job was to reinvent it as a musical, but to bring a real sense of musical theater and contemporary musical theater to Disney animation.
With Howard and Alan, with their theatrical background, you can see just within the songs themselves, there's a story there. Like when the mermaid, when she feels unhappy and she wants to be part of this other world, she sings this song, which really expresses what she wants, part of your world.
I want to be where the people are. I want to see them dancing.
The day the Janet Maslin review came out in the New York Times, and then all the other reviews came out for Little Mermaid. They anointed this new era in Disney animation in a way that was just, I said, wow, is this me? The New York critics, and wow.
Tale as old as time, true as it can be.
Barely even friends, then
somebody bends unexpectedly.
The night of the Oscars for Little Mermaid, we won 3 Academy Awards between the two of us. And he said, I want you to know I'm really happy tonight, really happy. He said, and when we get back to New York, we have to have a talk, an important talk. I said, oh, tell me, can we talk about it now? He said, no, not tonight, no. But when we get back to New York, I came into his living room, and we had the piano, and he said, close the door. And I closed the door, and I said, what is it? He said, well, you know. I said, no what? He said, I'm sick. I'm HIV positive.
We didn't really figure it out. We were asked to go back and work with Howard and Alan in New York. We thought, oh, well, he's just being a prima donna, and okay, fine, we'll go back and work in New York. But then it became clear that we were working there because Howard was getting weaker and, you know, he was profoundly ill.
Disney company stepped up and was incredible. They brought the entire production, as much as possible, back to upstate New York, near Howard's house. And they surrounded it with storyboards, and we'd bring in a piano and we'd work in that room as long as Howard could work. And on the session for Something There, Howard had to be connected into the session via telephone. He couldn't really sit up very well, and he couldn't speak. Everything was now like that. And Paige O'Hara was singing, new and a bit alarming. And Howard wanted to give a note about that. And he had to be very economical about it, because the whole studio had to be very quiet. I said, what is it, Howard? He said, tell Paige, Streisand. He said Streisand. And she said, everyone went, oh, new and a bit alarming.
New and a bit alarming.
There are those genius people that come around every now and again. Like Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, and I think Alan Menken and Howard Ashman are in that category. It was just a magic between the two of them.
One of the theater critics in New York said, the best musical on Broadway this year is not on Broadway, but it's on movie screens. And I think he was referring to Beauty and the Beast.
Well, who'd have thought?
Well, bless my soul.
Well, who'd have known?
Well, who indeed?
So it was natural that we would then take the film and adapt it for the stage. Now it's just celebrated its 10th anniversary on Broadway. And we also adapted Hunchback of Notre Dame. Hopefully we'll have another companion to Beauty and the Beast in the next couple years.
Howard taught us a lot about movie making and storytelling, and certainly Howard and Alan together were a pretty amazing duo, and they had such amazing energy and drive and collaboration and spirit, and his spirit really lives on.
Prince Ali, fabulous sea, Ali Ababa, strong as 10 regular men, definitely. He faced the galloping hordes.
Aladdin was originated by Howard and Alan together, and they had done an early version of Aladdin.
And we had talked about an idea with Howard when Howard was still alive in terms of a song for the Magic Carpet Ride, and Howard's very shorthand thing talking about was he said, well, I think it could be a Begin song, like Begin the Begin, have that kind of rhythm to it, and that's about as far as it went. And then basically, when we got to the point where we really needed the song, Alan then collaborated with Tim Rice on A Whole New World.
A whole new world, a dazzling place I never knew. But when I'm way up here, it's crystal clear.
The inspiration really was this young, romantically inclined couple flying around the world on a magic carpet.
Tim was incredibly respectful. And what we did was I actually wrote music first and even wrote dummy lyrics to try to convey the tone of what Howard, I thought, would do. And then Tim wiped away my lyrics and wrote his lyrics onto it.
A whole new world.
Don't you dare close your eyes.
And I think very much in Howard's tone. I think there's a seamlessness to Aladdin that is a miracle.
Alan isn't just about the song. We don't sit down with Alan Menken and say, all right, we have this song in the middle of the movie, it's a love song, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. He is as interested in the story and the character development and the motivation for the song as he is in the song itself.
Pocahontas, first of all, I went to another collaboration. This was Stephen Schwartz. And so the very first thing we wrote, we listened to a lot of Indian music and from various tribes and came up with certain tonalities. You know, you think I'm an ignorant savage. You've been so many places, I guess that must be so. But still I cannot see if the savage one is me. How can there be so much that you don't know? You don't know.
Colors of the Wind, take 41.
The song is a message song. It's about respecting the environment and respecting our world. And you know, it says, can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Can you see in the world around us all the rich array of blessings?
Rock and tree and creature.
I think Alan will be listed as one of the great writers of the century as far as his impact on the movie business. And our success at the radio was a tribute to his ability to write a specific song for the film, but at the same time write a melody that some 9-year-old kid in Seattle would hear and go, I can relate to that. That seems like something I like.
Learn things you never knew.
I went to a musical the other day at a high school, and all these kids could sing, and they were like completely on key. And afterwards I said, you guys are like 14 years old, 16 years old. How do you know all this? And they said, well, we grew up with Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Pocahontas, all these Alan Menken films. And they grew up watching them 50 times a week, and they grew up singing all those songs. And I think in no small part that kind of resurgence of interest in music and musical theater is because of Alan's gift.
The main thing I want to give an audience in a song is something to take away with, so that after they've heard the song, it's still alive in them. That it should be evocative and it should be memorable, and it should be something that once someone has heard it, it kind of belongs to them.
Alan's won 8 Academy Awards, which I believe right now makes him probably the most award winner of anyone alive. And he won the same number, if not more, Golden Globes. I think he's had 14 Academy Award nominations. It's really a stunning achievement of what he's accomplished.
We needed something that was heroic, like Superman. And also it needed a poignant nature about it. The message in a musical is not you, the message is that book, or that movie, or that character, maybe that true story.
Show them the mercy.
And you get to interpret it musically. And then people come to it sort of sharing with you, coming to the story or the material, and then sort of climbing aboard, in a sense, your score and riding it. It's incredibly gratifying to be able to take people on a ride like that.
He seems to have this unquenchable font of melodies. I don't know where he gets it from. It's truly his gift. And he's the greatest collaborator that way because he has this endless kind of chip running in his head where he can serve up all these ideas.
Walt Disney was an incredibly powerful force for good in the world. And I would hope that he would see in me a similar conduit of somebody who was able to allow really good things to come through me and through my talents. And that would be enough for me.
A whole new world. That's where we'll be. That's where we'll be. A thrilling chase. A wondrous place for you and me.
I know a place pretty as pie, out where the river bend lifts up with the end of the sky. It's left in Nebraska and over a crest on a little patch of heaven way out west. Everything's green, know what I mean? Darling, it's quite the sweetest sight that you ever done seen. Ain't nothing much out there, just life at its best on that little patch of heaven way out